Welcome to another exciting episode of Humanity 8.0, a podcast where we talk about movements and initiatives that seek to move humanity to its next epochal iteration. This podcast is brought to you by Witlingo. When it comes to managing a community, one of the keys to success is the ability to effectively communicate with the members of that community. If you are a service coordinator or responsible for community engagement, Witlingo provides a multi-channel, multilingual notification and engagement platform to help you work more efficiently and effectively. For more information, please visit www.witlingo.com. That's www.witlingo.com. And now, here's your host, Dr. Ahmed Bouzid.
Let's do this thought experiment. Hopefully you can help me through it. I think when I reached out to you, I mentioned direct democracy. I'm really interested in direct democracy, and in the whole, it's not very well defined as such. It has a lot of meanings. But I wanted to run this thought experiment with you, since you've thought about democracy a lot more than I have, and I'm always looking for folks who have thought about something a lot more than I have, because I learn. And hopefully the audience will learn along as we do this. Okay, so I am in the 8th District of Virginia. Okay? My representative is Don Baer. He's a Democrat, he's a decent guy. Most of the votes that he casts, I agree with. But some of them I don't agree with at all. I'm not going to say which ones, because then I'm going to paint myself into a corner. Now, let's say I was living somewhere else where my representative was not representing me at all. And worse than that, let's say on certain issues, they were not representing the majority of their district at all. For example, there are districts where, let me give you some numbers here. So 64%, this is not the district, but like in general, 64% of Americans support stricter gun laws, 64%. So it's almost 2 out of 3, right? Let's see, 70%, let's see, 2/3 of Americans disapprove of the Israeli-Gaza thing, the way we're supporting them. 6 out of 10 oppose increasing defense budgets. Okay. Clearly, there is more than a majority that believes something, and yet almost in each one of these, it's dogmatic. It's like 90, all of them, except for 2 renegades or 3 here and there in the Senate, or maybe a bunch of them in Congress, vote the other way. They're voting against the will of the people, and it's not a small percentage. I mean, some of them, even Republicans, are on the majority of, of what I'm only presumptive of what I as a Democrat would be for. So here's the thought experiment. Imagine that Don Baer, right, didn't have the amount of agency or discretion that he has today. Meaning that today he belongs to a caucus, he belongs to a political party, he needs to toe the line because they finance him. He has donors, right, who have a weight, who want him to, vote this way or that way, even if the majority of people don't. So he has a lot of agency, a lot of discretion, right? And obviously, he's not going to do things that are going to upset the people 2 years on, right? He's not going to vote, for restricting abortion rights. Those are no-nos. He's not going to touch that, right? But, it's the same thing with the other side, Second Amendment and so forth. But there's a lot of stuff that he does that the majority of his constituency does not want him to do, or does not agree with him. But when voting comes, it's like, all right, so what do you want? You want that guy over there, right, who's going to touch on these core issues, right? So I'll give you the core issues, but I have discretion on these matters. So it's sort of a bargain in a way, right? Bargain, not that it's a good bargain, but it's just, an agreement in a way. Now, imagine instead of having that discretion, he had zero discretion. He was an avatar. He was a pure avatar, He went and he cast exactly what the majority of his district wanted, okay? And And then one might say, well, how do you find out what the majority is, and so on? Well, let's say we use a polling agency that does methodically frames the question in a way that is not loaded and does it scientifically and so on and so forth. And then if 51% of people believe X, Don Bayer votes as the 51% want. And one might say, well, there's some errors there and there. And say, well, the question then I would answer, so yeah, it's not perfect, but it's more perfect than Don Bayer systematically voting against the people for anything other than the core issues, right? So, and that would be for me a truly representative democracy that represents the people, with the folks, every bill, and it's not a lot of bills. The bills that matter, it's not a lot. The ones that are like post office, this and that, just administrative, every vote's like the same, right? But the ones that matter, right? Ones that have like, should we increase our support for Ukraine, right? Should we? I don't know. There's a whole bunch of them, right? Um, where he may vote in a way that is not the same as the majority. Okay, so now that's the thought experiment. Imagine we have this, and somehow let's forget the logistics. How do we get to that point? Let's just say this is the arrangement, and let's say he is bound, I don't know, somehow, right, to do as the will of the people is, and the will of the people as expressed by the poll, right? What do you think about that, and where is it wrong?
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to my mind is, would the same rule apply for all of Don Bayer's colleagues in the state legislature? And in this experiment, is everyone, all however many hundred some legislators there are they all bound to the same thing? Also doing whatever 51% of their constituents want to do.
Well, just so that I can, yeah, and then we'll get to that because I think it's a good question. Let's just, so that we can just focus on this experiment. He's the only one. There's going to be a first. He's the first. Poor guy, first guy who turned into an avatar, a pure avatar. Okay, and then he's bound by the will of the people, and he's fulfilling his duty regardless of whatever else is happening. He is truly, right, representing the people, as opposed to halfway. But go on. Let's just assume that, and then we'll go
Yeah.
back to your question, to your point, because it's a good
Yeah,
point.
I mean, I think in an isolated case, yeah, I think that would be a great experiment. I would love to see what that looked like in practice. And I just off the top of my head, I can't think of a downside, other than, oh, actually, no. I mean, if it really was a true majority, no other constraints or concerns on the table, um, yeah, I think that would be very interesting and a good thing to at least try and see where it goes. But I think the problem comes in when you have legislative bodies that need to make decisions. And so in order to actually affect the change that the majority of people want, you need the majority of the representatives to agree on it. And so I don't know how that works. I know that is often why some of these compromises happen, is, well, you give me this one, I'll give you this one, that kind of thing. And so, um, if it was a system where every representative voting for what the majority of the people wanted, but that just led to a bunch of like split votes or things never happening, or I don't know that that's a good outcome either. There has to be some sense of balance there. Unless it was like a pure direct democracy model where the representatives weren't even in the picture, right? Like whatever, like in the case of a ballot measure, right? Yay or nay, that's what happens. That's what gets passed. Um, so I think that's where I see the drawback come when you try to take that avatar model and scale it.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good, okay. That's useful to me. I'm just thinking about, and so I guess the way my first reaction would be, I don't want Don Bayer to do any horse trading on the big issues, for example, right? Um, and maybe one way to refine it is, I guess, I mean, who would decide, right? What are the big issues and what are not the big issues, right? There are certain things that if 60, it could be something like along the lines of, if 60+% of people believe in this way, that's it. Otherwise, we have discretion. something like that. I don't know, maybe that way, that's one way to
Well,
I,
and I mean, so I am aware of work on the local level. There are companies and processes that use a deliberative method to help folks in a, let's say in a city decide, right? Okay, the city, um, it's city budget time. How do you, what do you, the residents of that city, think that the city spending its money on? That's called participatory budgeting, right? And so there's a whole process that people go through to decide what are the priorities, what are the things that we as a community value most, and then the things that get the most support are the things that the city allocates money toward working on. So I'm sure there could be some kind of a process here decide, okay, what are the most important issues to my particular constituency?
yeah. Okay. All right. So that's the end of that thought experiment. um, I want to ask you this question. Maybe, I mean, we've made a lot of progress in many, many fields, right? Technology, medicine, education, social progress in terms of being more inclusive. There's a lot of, I think, I'm a progressive in the true sense of progressive. I do believe that there's something called progress, right? I don't think we're just moving, blocks
Mm-hmm.
around. It's a new way of looking at things. I think there is progress, in terms of many, many things. But it feels to me that why are we still using, an 18th century model of government, with all the assumptions that it came with, the electoral college and and then the vote, one vote and one representative, like I'm just saying here. Why are we still stuck there? Why haven't we innovated? Like term limits, it seems to me like clearly like a low-hanging fruit innovation. Why are we stuck? Why is the system so, antiquated? And and I believe what's happening right now, in addition to all the economic disturbances that are happening, which I think I'm a sort of like a Marxist. I believe everything comes from the economics, right? And what we're seeing right now is sort of the reverberation. But why are we still stuck with that model? Why haven't we evolved? What do you think
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I think some of it, I've heard this from people. So there's a whole group of people that's working to expand the size of the House of Representatives, right? It's at the same number
Mhm.
it's been for 100 years, even as the country's population has increased, I don't know how much, but has increased many, many magnitudes since over the past 100 years, right? So we should really have like at least 100 more people in the House of Representatives than we do now if we want to keep the same proportions that we've had historically. But I think there is a strong status quo
Yeah.
bias, combined with some of the systems being set up to deliberately be very hard to change because America's founders were skeptical of the people having too much power, right? So they put systems in place that couldn't just be changed willy-nilly. And so I think that is working. I think a system where a lot of people are tuned out and just happy to go along and not really think too deeply about what's going on. Things could be better. I think that certainly works against some of these things. I think it's always the case that people who have benefited from the way that a system is
Yeah.
to change it because it might hurt them. But no, I share your frustrations about a lot of these things. I'm here in Pennsylvania and we have a closed primary system. So that means you have to be registered with one of the two political parties to vote in a primary. If you're an independent, you can't vote in a primary. And so there's been efforts to change that in our legislature for decades now, but it hasn't gone anywhere because the people in the legislature are scared of what's going to happen if independents are now able to vote in the primary process. Would that jeopardize their ability to retain their seats?
Yeah, yeah. And I guess smuggled in there is the notion of the political party, which was not something that the founding father
Hmm.
thought was a good idea, right? Because it creates all kind of dynamics that create a natural behavior. And this is one of them, right? Political
Hmm.
party, somebody's going to come in to elect the weakest of the candidates and so playing games, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so even when if I were calling myself a very conservative means I want to go all the way back to what the founding fathers meant. one innovation would be to get rid of these parties, right? No more parties. You
Mm-hmm.
don't belong to a party. Everybody is on their own. And then campaign reform, right? Instead of, we know that money is what's killing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Why don't we have money that is like in Europe, for example, you don't have this issue, right? So you don't end up with a two-party system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes or no, black or white, red or blue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then also technology, right? The technology that we have today, right? Where if you go $1 over your balance, the bank knows it immediately and notifies you, and this is money, and so the technology is there, for important things. There's nothing more important than my money for my family, right? And so we have all of that, and yet when it comes to voting, we're still doing it the antiquated way. And of course, I know that it needs to be inclusive and so on and so forth, but because there doesn't seem to be an effort to take us from where we are to something that's really healthy in terms of ensuring that decisions are not made by a small number of people. Like the notion that there are 9 folks who decide on, or 4 or 5 out of those 9,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, who decide monumental. These are human beings, right? That's all they are. Is human beings fallible? They don't have, access to God or the truth or whatever, and they decide, and we've seen it, right? And yet we tolerate it. We talk, some people are saying we have to increase the court from 9 to I don't know what 17, whatever it may be, but still, that's still a small number of people. I guess my question to you is the following: do you think that the way our educational system is set up, and I don't mean by what we teach, but the way it's set up and the workplace itself, these are not democratic institutions. They are top-down institutions. We are trained when we start from first grade, there's a boss and there's hierarchy and we have to follow order. And then when we graduate from college, maybe college, we have a little bit of and then when we go to work, there's the boss, and what he says or she says is it. And so we're spending almost all of our time in a setting that is not democratic, where we don't feel that we have a say, that we feel that, okay, that's the way the world works, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
the teacher and the principal and their authorities. And so we go to school, get trained to agree, with the structure of the boss or the powerful or the people who direct, and we just follow order, unless we want to be in trouble, or unless we want to be put in the corner if it's first or second grade. And so we taught that. So if we are living, most of our lives outside of our home, and in the home, maybe there's the parents when you're a child. So you go from school to the parents. And so all the way to teenage, and of course we rebel, and why shouldn't we rebel when we are teens, right? We rebel because all of this time we have been living under a dictatorship, truly a dictatorship, right? So we're trained to put up with dictatorship. And then we go to work, same thing. So how do we expect citizenry to actually to have this ethos of, yeah, I am as good as anybody else and I have an opinion and it needs to be heard and respected, and I'm going to get involved when all of that time I've been trained to be obedient?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a huge question. The thing that came to my mind is that here in State College where I live, we actually have a democratic school, a small D democratic high school where the students set the curriculum, they set the rules, they
Oh,
set everything. And so there are, classes that you might roll your eyes at, like a class on Tarantino films, or I did a podcasting workshop there a few months ago, so I got to meet some of the students, and they're engaged. They seem to enjoy going to school, which is not always the case in American
yeah.
public
Wow.
schools. So
What's the name
yeah,
of
I
the
think that it is interesting to see what happens when we let some of those constraints go. And there are, of course, worker cooperatives that are more democratically run. And I think those things are successful when they are started. It's just
yeah,
getting over that initial hump and that status quo bias and some of those things to really get them in place and have them take root and be successful. And it really, I don't know that there's ever going to be, just because of everything you described, like a top down, okay, we're not do this anymore. All these structures, we're just going to get rid of them. I think change is going to have to come from
Yeah.
the bottom up and in very kind of small, isolated ways that may scale and may not scale, right? I think that's the other thing. Like maybe it's, if you can do something good in your community, that's still a really good thing to do. I think there's often well, I hear some of the direct democracy work diminished because it's like, well, this is just one little place or one state or this or that. It still doesn't make, it's sort of talking down to it or not giving it credence because of that. But that is still like one place that is doing something that is more democratic and making positive change for the people in that place. And so I think we tend to look down on those things because we always want bigger, better, more, faster, right? And not appreciating the wins that we have when we do get
Yeah,
them.
that's great. Um, there's an expression in technology. It says forgetting the name of the person who coined it. It says the future is already here. It's just not everywhere yet, right?
Mm.
Meaning anything that you thought that is going to happen 20 years from now, it can go mainstream, is already here in some lab or somebody is playing with it and all that. But then at some point, if it has enough value and so on, then it becomes ubiquitous, like the internet, right? The internet
Mm.
was there for 20 years in the 60s, as a lab. And then in the 90s, it blew up. What's the name of that school? That's very fascinating that they do that.
Yeah, it's called the Delta program at State College High School.
Would love to interview
And they're
somebody. Is there
yeah,
somebody?
it's part of a movement. I don't know how large it is, but there are others like it across the country.
Can you connect me with someone there? Because I'd love to talk to them.
Sure, sure, absolutely.
That's wonderful. Okay, so I picked up from what you said that you are at least ambivalent about direct measures like ballot, like direct initiatives, right? What do you call those? Like, well, yeah,
Oh, ballot measures? No, I might have undersold it before. Like I think that they are um one of the best tools that people have at their disposal. And they're not available everywhere. I would love to see all 50 states have the ballot measure. I don't know if that's going to happen. Yeah, I am definitely team direct democracy. Knowing that it's not perfect, of course,
yeah.
but I think that the pros outweigh the cons.
Yeah, and it's for me it's not about perfect, right? It's about, is it better than what we
Mm-hmm.
have? I think it is better than what we have. Yeah, so something that's always puzzles me is the following, right? In these initiatives, right? Every time you want to set up an initiative, you have to go and collect X number of, I don't know, 100, couple 100,000 votes or whatever it may be, right? Or more
Signatures, yes.
signatures, right? You have to do it from scratch, right? Why hasn't, I don't know, a company or something, collected, 300 $400,000 people signatures, right? And then in the database, and it's clean and they are updated and so forth. And then whenever there is somebody who wants to collect, they send them and they say, would you like to sign? And then it happens. Why do they have? I mean, that would cost a lot less money and so forth. Of course, that is not something that I guarantee you state assemblies would like to see happen. Um, but why? That's the kind of innovation I'm just wondering why it is not happening. Why isn't California, for example, which has Silicon Valley and so
Mm-hmm.
forth, why hasn't some entrepreneur done that, collected 1 million of these? Whenever somebody wants to do, right, this, now those are clean and everything. And so they go and get them. And they say, I want you to go and email these people this much, and then they this about this measure, and if they want to sign up for it, let's do it. As opposed to this grimy way of going around in the streets and in the corner and doing this,
Yeah.
and then signatures are challenged and so forth, and you're not sure if all 6 months of your work is going to go up the smoke and so forth. Do you have any thoughts about why it's not happening, or it's just that somebody needs to just do it?
Yeah. So there are there are companies that ballot measure organizers hire to help with signature gathering, but I don't think it's the technology piece. I think largely because the regulations still require handwritten signatures. I think that there's this is again a place where maybe the government lags behind the private sector in terms of security and being able to verify that, okay, because someone did this via a link they got in their email, is it the person who actually says they're going to do it? And I know, and that there are ways to verify all of those things, but I think that the government is a little bit slower to catch up to those things. But the people that I talk to that organize these campaigns, I think that they like the grassroots nature of it. It's an opportunity to get out and talk to people and educate them on the issue when they're collecting their signature. I think it's a way to build support for the cause and maybe get them to vote yes on it when it does actually end up on the ballot, or vote no if that's what they're collecting the signatures for. But it's a way to just bring a bit of personality back into things and have a more one-on-one connection. One of the stories I told in When the People Decide was in the city of Cincinnati. There was an effort by the city to repeal protections against discrimination for LGBTQ people. And it passed in the city, and there was a ballot campaign to repeal it. And it failed the first time because it was largely done through advertising. And this was in the 90s. So billboards, magazine ads, that kind of thing. Then 10 years later, the city's LGBTQ community came together and they said, okay, we're not going to do this mass advertising. We're going to go and talk to our neighbors and help them understand who we are as people, right? And so they were successful that time because people sort of understood more what the stakes were. And I realize it is wildly inefficient, but I think in some cases there is benefit to that more grassroots approach. I would love to see maybe some kind of hybrid of that. There is some way that technology can help, just like when you register to vote, at least here in Pennsylvania, you have to fill out a paper, right? Like there has to be some better way to do this more efficiently and more quickly. But I wouldn't want to lose the personal element of it either.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. I think you're right. I think hybrid. Maybe what we should do is there should be a ballot measure to change the way ballot, so we don't need signatures and right. A sort of a meta kind of a move. And then also because otherwise, if it's purely you have to collect, I think you need a lot of passionate volunteers, but also money. And so that's
yes, it's very expensive.
So only people who have money or big organizations. So if you have, let's say a cause that folks, poor folks who, whatever, right? Who can't afford, if they have this system where they can just, create the thing, maybe create a video explaining it so there's at least a touch of that, and then have it be something that can go on the ballot. I don't know. I think we are agreeing anyway. So where I'm gonna ask you something that hopefully I won't embarrass you. Where do you want to be 5 years from now when it comes to democracy and your work? Where do you want do you want to make a career out of what you're doing or go run for political office?
No, definitely not run for
What does Jenna
political
want to do?
office. My husband says that I have a job being Jenna Spinelle, which is something that I'm very grateful for and feel very fortunate to have. The thing that me the most excited and always has since my early days as a journalist is finding interesting stories and sharing them with as many people as I can. I love when everybody else zigs, this person zags. Like I love those kind of outliers, oddballs, weirdos. And I think that that's kind of what you need to be successful in some of the grassroots political work. So I hope that in 5 years I'm still telling those stories, and maybe it's more stories of success, right? Of this campaign that was in progress before but is now successful, or has caught on in other places and start to see some of all this hard work pay off. And if I could say I had a small part in that, all the better. Whether I'm still doing it in this role or with a different organization remains to be seen. But I hope that I have the opportunity to interface with people who are doing this work and help spread the word about how they're doing it and how others can get involved.
All right. Well, Jenna Spinelle, thank you so much for your time. It was really an interesting conversation. I didn't expect it to be this interesting. So thank you for your thoughts. As I said, I'm hoping that this will be part of the series about democracy where we are today. I think is an interesting moment. And so I'll keep you apprised. And this episode will go out probably next week. So I'll let you know. It will go in 2 parts. 30 minutes each, but they'll be both published at the same time.
Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you for the opportunity. Looking forward to hearing the rest of the series.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Humanity 8.0 with your host, Dr. Ahmed Bouzid, founder and CEO of Witlingo.